Good afternoon and very welcome to this information session on the Civil Society Cooperation open call. This call we call, for easy reference, the CSC call. And this is what I will use as a name during our presentations here today. My name is Lene Meyer. I'm from the executive agency dealing with the Erasmus Plus program. I'm working in the youth unit. But in this session, as you probably will have seen, we're actually dealing with two calls. So one on education and training and one on youth. We're just checking some technical issues. It's okay?
There is just delay.
Okay. So now I hope everything is okay technically, so that you can see the presentation and also you can hear my voice. I'm not sure that you can actually see me because I can't see you can't see me. I'm surrounded here in Brussels, where we're talking from today. I'm surrounded by my colleagues working both on youth and on education and training. So we are going today to talk about the Civil Society Cooperation open call, the call which is in fact two calls, one on education and training and one on youth. For many years it was one call, and the structure of the two calls, what is now two calls, is exactly the same. We needed, for technical reasons, to split what was previously one call into two calls. So we now have an education part, or an education and training part, and we have a youth part. It also means that you, as organizations working in youth and or education and training, can apply for both calls. We have the same deadline and you know, the structures are the same. We do not recommend that you apply for both calls. When we select projects according to what activities you have. So we normally look at if you have activities related to youth or to education and training. And if you apply for the education and training call and we see that you are mainly doing youth-related activities, well, then your application is less relevant than what it would be if you had applied for the youth call. There are also issues around the definitions and the eligibility criteria, and we're going to explain that later to you. But for technical reasons, as I said right in the beginning, this year we have two calls on civil society cooperation, one on youth and one on education and training. The first thing I normally also say when we have these information sessions, that is that we have one important thing to remember, the most important thing to remember, that is to respect the deadline for applying. So I always mention that first when we have our information sessions. So the deadline for applying for these two calls, that is the 15th of December at 5 o'clock here, Brussels time, as we call it. This is the only thing that you do have to respect in order to go into the system. Then there are some admissibility criteria and there are some eligibility criteria for your call to be accepted. We are going to talk about them in this information session. I also want to say, no, the previous one. So I also want to say a bit about as an introduction still that we have received quite a lot of questions from you, and we're going to take them at the end of this session. I just want to, straight from the beginning, clarify a couple of issues. We have eligibility criteria for this call. In order to be able to apply, you need to be what we call a European NGO, so a non-governmental organization, or an EU-wide network. You will have seen, if you have studied the call, that the definition of a European NGO is the same for youth and for education and training, whereas there are two definitions for what are EU-wide networks, one for youth and one for education and training. We're going to go into details on these definitions in this info session because that is very important that you fulfill the criteria for being a European NGO and for being an EU-wide network. The other thing that I wanted to say straight on from the beginning of the session is also, what are the eligible countries? In short, it's the Erasmus Plus program countries. So all of those countries which are in the Erasmus Plus program. That is the EU 27 member states, plus the EEA, plus 3 countries, I think it's Serbia, Turkey, and North Macedonia from the southeastern part of Europe. So these are the countries which are eligible for participating in this call. Until now, it was only EU member states, but it's now Erasmus Plus program countries. And just to underline, organizations coming from the United Kingdom, they are not eligible because United Kingdom, they are not anymore part of the EU, sadly, as we say so. You have in front of you the agenda, so I'm not done the welcome. And as I said right at the beginning, I have here with me in this room colleagues working both on youth and on education and training. And I also have 2 colleagues from what we call our mirror units. So the units which are doing the policy, the political stuff, as we say there. And they are going to talk about the policy context for these 2 calls right after my introduction here. So I welcome Babis from the youth unit and Renato from the education and training part. Renato is actually sitting not with us here in Brussels. He is on long distance from Italy, and I do sincerely hope that this will work, that he can come in and talk without problems. I can see him on my screen and that he's smiling, so we hope we will have the sound on as well in a few minutes. Now, he's there, I can see that. For the general information about the 2 calls, we will go to that before the break, and we will then approximately halfway through this information session we will have a 15 minutes break also, so you can send any questions that you will have to us, because we would like to answer as many as possible at the end of the session. And after the break, we will do a number of tips and recommendations on how to fill in the application form and how to submit your proposal. One big issue for us here at the Commission is that we have, during the, I think, last 1.5 years, changed all our IT tools. So now it's the first time under the new program period, which runs from 2021 to 2027, that civil society cooperation organizations, that they can submit applications in what we call the e-grants system through the Funding and Tender Opportunities portal. And we will go into quite some detail also in this information session about how to work with this system. I hope you won't battle too much with it. I must say we sometimes think that we are battling a bit too much, but we are there to support you on that as well. And there's a lot of information material available on the net on how to cope with the e-grant system, the different parts that you need to work with once you make an application. Now, Jose, can you just go before? One before? Yeah. For the practical issues of this session, you see that our PowerPoint will be available after the session, I think on the internet side of the agency where you found the announcement of this session as well. And we also record and make available this session to you, so you can download if you're interested in listening to it. We have questions, a question and answer session, and if you want to ask questions, please use these two mails, which you see, two mail addresses, which you see there on the screen, one for youth and one for education and training. And we hope to address them at the end of the session. And just right at the end of this slide, you will see that there is a link to the Funding and Tenders Opportunities portal. That's where you find all the information about this call, as well as the application forms and so on. And you can start right away and submit your application today if you are ready. So all of the documentation is there. The one important thing you have to remember is that the deadline is the 15th of December at 5 o'clock. So now I will give the word to Babis, who will talk a little bit about the youth policy text. Yeah, and let's just see. He's going now to the computer and will run this show. So up to Babis now.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lene. I will try to take out the mask now. It's better for. Okay. So I'm going to present you some general things, first of all, about the Erasmus program and the programming period. As you know, there are four main, we call it horizontal priorities that everything connected with the Erasmus Plus must follow. And it's the inclusion and the diversity, the green, digital and participation. These are the four priorities that we have to include in all of our activities and actions and proposals when we are talking about Erasmus. The second thing is that, yes, there are some specific objectives for this period. And of course, we all know that for this period, the youth part of the Erasmus, where we are going to apply and where you are going to submit your applications, is 2.5 billion in a total of 26.2 of the whole Erasmus. So the youth part is really interesting for this period. The important thing is that that for us the European Union Youth Strategy 2019-2027, under the three priorities of engage, connect, and empower, is the guideline and the context for whatever we are doing, also here in the Erasmus Plus program. And it's interesting to say that for the next period and for the next year particularly, the priority that we have, the main priority is the implementation of the EU Youth Strategy. As you all know, we say that we are in the recovery period, so we hope that this terrible thing of the pandemic will close, will finish, and this is why we believe that it's important to make it a total restart of the whole youth strategy, focusing mainly on the EU youth dialogue processes, the mutual learning activities, and of course the youth in other policy areas of the European Union, and this is why also the EU youth report, but also the youth coordinator are here in order to understand what other DGs are doing for youth, and not only DG EAC and the programs of European Union on youth. An interesting topic that we're going to have with us until May 2022 is the Conference on the Future of Europe. It's one of our priorities, and I would like to ask and to encourage you to participate, to propose activities, and to upload conclusions from your events, from whatever you are doing under the Erasmus platforms. The conference, it's practically it's an ongoing debate and dialogue with the citizens, and youth is one of the priorities. And at the same time, we will try to explore how would European Union, how Europe will be in the next period. And an interesting thing that I would like to underline is that is the implementation of the European Youth Work Agenda. As you know, there is a decision from December 2020 when together European Union and the Council of Europe signed the document of the European Youth Work Agenda. We are happy to say that in the next days, 23 to 24 of November, we're going to have the first meeting of the subgroup of youth work. This meeting will guide us until the spring-summer period to the conclusions of how we will build the new portal on youth work, a new tool for the support of the European Youth Work Agenda and the work of the youth workers in cooperation with the BONE process and the other tools that are created by the Saltos and of course the Erasmus Plus on digital youth work, and the PLAs on youth work that we had and we will have also. So youth work will be an interesting priority for us for the next period, and it's important to say that together with the Council of Europe, we're going to open slowly a new chapter on the recognition of youth work in European level for the next 2 years in parallel with what we are planning to do with the European Union Council of Youth Partnership. So I'm going to focus a little bit more on that part, the 2022 European Year of Youth. As you know, from 15th of September, we have the announcement, and now we are preparing the European Year of Youth. The important thing behind is that the year will try to emphasize on the reactions of the society after the pandemic, the topics of the impact on education, employment, mental health of young people, but also the empowerment of young people and civil society youth organizations. There are some objectives from the year: raise awareness about opportunities for young people, supporting young people to become active and engaged citizens, and of course targeting all young people, and I will repeat this, all, including and especially those with fewer opportunities, and of course activities for inclusion in national, regional and local level, with a strong involvement of youth civil society organizations and of course young people themselves. The guiding principles of the year, forward looking for bottom-up activities. We are not interested to design something here in Brussels for young people and youth civil society organizations around Europe. We already opened a discussion, and today in the morning we had the first open meeting with civil society organizations and the national coordinators of the year. Around 255 people were there, and it was a very interesting discussion on the priorities and the topics of the youth year. It's important to say that the year will have a strong connection with the Next Generation EU campaign, and of course, as we say, also the Conference on the Future of Europe. For the working agenda, of course, we are going to include all European Union institutions, the youth organizations at all level, the national coordinators, which are appointed by the member states, all the DGs and of course the young people that they are interested to participate, and this is how we are going to move on. Thank you very much. I hope it was useful, and in case that there are anything that we can clarify, we'll be here. Thank you a lot.
Thank you so much, Babis. This was a very quick rundown on youth. I hope that, I mean, there's a lot of reference material available on the net under the European Commission websites. You're very welcome to consult that, of course. And again, if you have questions, don't hesitate to write to us in our functional mailboxes. Now we have Renato on from Italy. Renato, I hope you can come through to all of us. Please proceed.
Yeah, thank you very much. I don't know if you hear me and you see me on the screen. I may hear you from Brussels quite well. Is it okay? Okay. Let's go. Good afternoon. My name is Renato Girelli, and I have been working at the European Commission Director General for Education and Culture for almost the last 25 years, dealing with all the education policies and programs, in particular on social inclusion aspects, and now recently on how we may bring more knowledge about the union to learners at the lowest level of education, so primary and secondary education. The colleague has presented already the priorities we have at the Commission for the area of youth, and the executive agency colleagues will shortly explain you all the specificity of this very peculiar annual call that is launched parallel youth and education and training. I will, in the meantime, introduce rapidly the policies on education and training, and outlining what we are doing at the Commission and what are the main priorities for the years to come. Next slide, please. The beneficiary of this call, the call on education and training, will have a quite important role to play. They will have to work on a number of challenges that the European Union is facing nowadays. Through the activities, and in particular the development of implementation of innovative and creative strategies and actions, we expect you to increase cooperation on issues connected to the country-specific recommendation. We will see in a moment how and what are the indicators we normally use to feed the European semester. Organization will contribute also to reinforce the civil society participation using all the potential of the digital communication, and we expect the beneficiary of this call to reach out widely and disseminate the successful policies and actions they have already engendered in the past. The Commission relies, as in the past, on the work of organizations such as yours, that thanks to their network and thanks to the contact with a large number of end users, may provide us data analysis and information and good advice on the relevant education and training issues. Next slide, please. Let's now go, let me see, I cannot see, let's now go through the main policy priorities that have been set by the new Commission and how these constitute the continuum on the one side, but the extension of what we have done in the previous period of programming. There are several priorities, and some are more systemic and directly connected to the education and training system, and we see in particular the European education area and making a success of the digital transformation, and other are impacting in a broader way the society. For example, and I already mentioned the environmental protection, so learning about how to deal with the climate changes and how we may make a more active participation of youngsters and learners in the daily life. It's very important for us also to work in these fields that have been set as priority for the education and training area. I also stress, and it was already quite well explained in detail by Babis, that this call also for the education and training part should also contribute to the European Year of Youth, the year 22. This is an important common action that the European Union and the member states are wishing to implement to inject confidence and enhance the dynamic of our youngsters after the critical period we have been living in the last 2 years. This should also help the full recovery of our welfare and our society status. Next slide, please. Looking now back to the Europe 2020 strategy, and in particular the indicators we have used in the framework of the European semester, we have 3 parameters that we are following quite closely. The first major common goal of the Union was to reduce the number of people at risk of poverty and exclusion by some 20 million by 2020. The second and third are specifically linked to education, and these are, of course, the target of early school leavers that is checked with the population 18 to 24 years old, and the tertiary education attainment that is checked on the population 30 to 34 years old. Next slide, please. Concerning the first of these parameters, that is a quite important one, the poverty and exclusion, the rate has increased continuously for a few years after the crisis of 2009. Thanks to the common effort and the important action of the Union and the Member States, from 2015 we have seen a positive trend, and we were moving slowly but firmly towards the objective that was set in 2015. We have been quite close to reach with the curve that was initiated after 2015, the goal of reducing by 20 million people those who are at risk of poverty. However, we see on the last figure, the one for 2020, that due the pandemic and the following crisis that is an economic and societal one, the curve is now reverted, and the number of people with high risk to fall in poverty and exclusion increased the gains in a quite dramatic way. It should have also been taken into account that while the average of the Union has seen this approaching to the goal, we still have quite a number of regions and groups that are quite far to the objective that we have set. Next slide, please. Among the targets and the indicators that are related to education and training, as we said, we have 2 major issues. All these indicators and all the progress we have among the member states are reported every year in the Monitor. The Monitor is an annual publication organized by the Commission Director General for Education and Culture, and is due to give in a snapshot the situation at the average of the Union and also country by country, highlighting the areas where there is need to improvement. Next slide, please. If we look again at the 2 indicators we mentioned before, we may say that from 2015 to 2020, we were very close to reach our objective. If you take as an example, probably you jumped one, probably there was the ESL before the tertiary education attainment. If you may go back one slide, please. We are approaching the objective, and we are even going beyond certain targets. However, if you look at the data in a more accurate way and in a disaggregated way, we see that there are still a number of factors that affect several of our groups of learners. Now, from 2020 onwards, we are setting the new target, and you will see that for early school leaving, we have changed and we will decrease by 2025 by at least 1%, so less than 9% of early school leavers. But we have again to rely not only on the average results of the union, but to take care about the less wealthy groups and those who risk to be marginalized. And this is valid also for the tertiary attainment. Next slide. In the usual rush and the very high speed of our institutional work, in fact, we tend to look more at the comprehensive exercise at the European level, while we should really have a specific attention on the groups that are not really following the same trend. If you look at these numbers for the tertiary educational level, we see that there is an important gap between men and women, and there is also an important gap between the native-born and the foreign-born in the European Union. On that, I hope that thanks to the civil society work and thanks to your voice and the voice of the beneficiaries, we may in the future have a more important attention to these minorities and the groups that are needing specific interventions. Otherwise, we risk to lose hundreds of thousands of learners, and with losing them, we will have a real loss of the great potential for our society too. Next slide. Now, what are the major initiatives that the Commission has initiated in the last couple of years? We have, during this Commission, many more interaction among the services and among the subject areas. And so you see here in a slide the quite important number of strategies and the action program and action plan that have been initiated by the services. Via this, we will support the development of initiatives that are also implying an exercise by our education and training systems. In particular, if we go to the next slide that shows us what we are doing specifically for our areas of education and culture, the two major issues that we already advocated are the European education area with its sixth dimension and almost 40 actions, and the digital education action plan. With these, we will support the development of new teaching methodologies, innovative approaches, and the mutual learning and the sharing of good practices. Next slide. The European education area is something that was already in the making since 2017 after the Gothenburg Social Summit, where all the member states agreed that we should move faster and more in depth in this kind of common exercise. And now we see that with the last communication that was issued in September, the Commission is really enhancing the process and moving quite fast to realize this quite important exercise for 2025. Next slide, please. The European education area is based on the six dimension and 40 concrete actions with milestones that are really well defined from now to be completed by 2025. On the quality side, we would like and we expect a more and important focus on key competencies, combat and the underachievement of youngsters in basic skills, enhance also the promotion of critical thinking and an active participation in the daily life in the society, in particular reinforcing and introducing knowledge about the European Union values via actions and projects organized at school and vocational education and institution level. On inclusion, support accessibility and the transition education to the labor market are the two main areas where we focus our attention. And in particular, I mentioned here the important work that is preparing, it is under preparation and will be quite soon issued also by the colleagues in DG Employment on the approach that we may have and the member states should have on micro-credentials. The transition already advocated by Babis on green and digital is, of course, one of the major issues for the future. We have launched the Education for Climate Coalition, and we are working quite close with the other Director Generals to try to reduce the gap in the digital issues for our society. The digital divide remains an important issue to be tackled at the level of education and training, in particular for the general education. Teacher and training. On the teacher and training action, we value our teachers and we want to support them in this transitional period, and that's why we will have very soon the first teachers academies fully fledged and running, and in a couple of years we will have all the teacher training organized under the Jean Monnet action as well. This is a way to support our teachers and headmasters in schools and vocational education and training so that they may afford the changes and introduce new content and methodologies in their daily activities. Finally, the higher education part of the European education area that is largely based on the new European universities that will become a fully fledged strategy from now on. Next slide, please. The second and final main area we have under DGEAC, under Education and Culture, is the Digital Action Plan. And as of 2021, a number of actions have been already realized. In particular, we have created the hub, the Digital Action Plan hub, with the first meeting among the national advisory services that are due to implement the specific policies. Beginning of next year, the first results of the work of the hub will be available and broadly broadcasted and proposed to the large public. The hub will become quite rapidly a large community of good practices and will expand to reach up to 4,000 participants. This will cover training, mentoring, peer learning activities, and share of good practices. Another achievement in the Digital Education Action Plan is the definition of a specific tool for the self-assessment of how technologies are used to teach and train the teachers. Next slide, please. So I close my presentation here. I thank you very much for the attention, and I wish you all the success in your work and in the preparation to your application for this call. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Renato, all the way from Italy. If you have questions to what Babis and Renato have talked about, please again send them to us in the functional mailboxes, and we will answer them. Now, I'm going into what the call actually says, so what you have to take into account if you would like to go in and apply for this open call. So we are talking about civil society cooperation in the field of youth and in the field of education and training. It's two calls, but much of the information in the call, in the two calls, that's that is similar for youth and education and training. And that concerns also to some extent the background, the priorities and the objectives, because we're talking about civil society cooperation, and it certainly concerns the whole structure of the call, which is actually exactly the same for youth as it is for education and training. This one. So the theme and priorities. This text which you see on this screen, it's always been like that. So what you see actually on the right side of the screen, so it's always been the purpose of these calls that we should strengthen cross-sectorial cooperation for greater synergies across different areas of actions which matters for young people, and that we should promote youth participation in various scales and formats, and we should support active citizenship. So that is what we expect that you will touch on when you do an application. So we also, and that's fairly new because it's not so long time since the von der Leyen Commission came in, but the von der Leyen Commission has these 4 overarching general priorities. That is inclusivity, equity, excellence, and innovation in education, and ensure that all citizens are equipped with basic skills. So the 4 general priorities of the von der Leyen Commission is also at the basis for this call. It's but if you look at the left side of this screen, you will see that we have put into this call for this year, specifically 2022, a reference to the European Year of Youth. Babis in his presentation spoke about the European Year of Youth, and it is important, or how should I phrase it, we appreciate if you in your application make references to how your activities incorporate issues related to the European Year of Youth. Let's go to the next slide. So here we have a slide about the objectives of the calls. So we provide structural support to European NGOs and EU-wide networks which are active in the field of youth and education and training. And just to explain what is structural support, that is what we call operating grants. So we support in this action the functioning of your organizations, and the functioning, this is as in opposition to that we would support the actions that you do, the activities you do. So for an operating grant, we support the functioning of your organization. So basically, we give you money to pay your staff, to pay your office, to pay meetings and so on. But when we actually evaluate your application, we do that on the activities that you do. That distinction is maybe important to keep in mind, because we will give you money for your operations, but when we select the applications to be funded, we actually look at the activities that you are doing. Now, what aims are we looking for the organizations, what they should describe in their applications? Well, we look for that there is issues around stakeholder awareness of European policy, the European policy agendas in the field of youth and respectively in the field of education and training. So you can refer to the EU youth strategy, the European youth strategy, and you can refer to the European education area. What we look to at it is also that you are increasing stakeholder commitment and cooperation with the public authorities for the implementation of policies and reforms in the field of use, respectively, in education and training, so that you have this civil society cooperation kind of function. We also look at how you boost stakeholder participation in the fields of youth and education and training, and how you involve yourself in the dissemination of policy and program actions, results, good practices, and so on. So this is what we are looking at in terms of objectives of your actions. The available budget, we have two calls. We have 4 million euros for youth, and we have 2.8 million euros for education and training. This is more or less what we have had for many years. The overall total budget is a bit higher for education and training this year around, but it's been 4 million for youth for many years. The project budget, so what you actually get for us if your project is a selection, if your action is selected, the maximum grant amount is 125,000 euro per project, and the minimum is 80,000. So that is the budget you should propose should be between those two numbers, 80,000 and 125,000. There is one exception, and it's a quite specific one, that is in the education and training part. If you are a European-wide network, you can apply for 200,000. It's a very exceptional issue, and there's a very specific definition for being an EU-wide network in education and training. This is the first CSC call under the new program period. We had for 2021, we had a prolongation for our old contracts. So 2022 is the first time that we will do contracts for civil society cooperation here. So first time under the new program period. And there are a couple of issues which are different, I would say, from what we used to do in this action. First of all, we are proposing that you should submit a budget based on real costs. Early on, we had what we call unit cost, and we paid staff and meetings. Now you should submit a budget which is what we call real cost based. That means that we are actually going to evaluate the real costs which you have in your organizations. So that could be staff cost. That's probably a big item for you. Your office costs in one way or the other. It could be meetings and so on. We will go more into the budget table later on in this information session. And secondly, we are offering you an operating grant for 1 year. That means that it would start 1st of January 2022. The eligibility period will start the 1st of January 2022 and run until the end of 2022. Earlier on, in the old program periods, we offered operating grants for civil society cooperation covering more years, and this was actually also our intention to do that here under the new program period. We didn't succeed to do that. There are some technical and legal issues for why we didn't succeed to do that. So that is why for 2022 we cover only 1 year of activities, and we will have, and it's also the reason why we have a budget-based, real cost-based budget. In fact, we wanted to have a more simple budget structure, but for technical and legal reasons, we couldn't do it for 2022. But we do hope that that will be changed for the future. It would facilitate for civil society corporations, organizations that to apply for this grant, but unfortunately it's not the case for 2022. I just want to say maybe 2 words about the grant amounts that we are giving, because many of you, I assume, who are listening to this info session would know that in the old program, there was a quite significant difference on the grant amounts which you were given if you applied for youth, for the youth grant, or if you applied for the education and training grant. That has in fact been harmonized, so now the grant amounts in the youth and in the education and training area, they are exactly the same, and it's based on some statistical analysis which we did on the old programs. There were no objective reason for us to keep this significant difference in the grant amounts given to youth, respectively education organizations. So we have harmonized that, and it is really the same nowadays. That also means that, I mean, it is for you in terms of which call you apply for. It doesn't matter in terms of grant amount and so on. It's the same for youth and for education. So it should matter. What should matter should be the activities which you are interested in carrying out in 2022. Now let's go to the next one. So the applicants, what should they be? Well, they must be organizations which are established in an eligible country, and I talked about that already in the beginning. What is an eligible country under this call? It's an Erasmus Plus program country. So it's the 27 EU member states, not the United Kingdom, so not the UK, but all the old member states, as we would then maybe say. And then it's the non-EU countries associated to the program. And these are the EEA countries. It's Norway, Liechtenstein, and Iceland. And then it's Turkey, North Macedonia, and Serbia. They are also Erasmus Plus program countries. It says there is a link when you look up the call on the funding and tender opportunities internet site. It says also that it includes countries which are in ongoing negotiations for accessing the program, and if this accession agreement has been signed before the grant signature. I'm not aware of that this will happen before we are actually before we can actually sign the grant agreement signatures for this call. That would mean that there should be new program countries before the end of April 2022, and I'm not aware that that should be the case. It is, and this is according to the financial regulation governing our operations within the EU Commission. We are obliged to evaluate operating grants and to do the grant agreements until the end of April. So you have a deadline, which is the 15th of December this year. And then it will not take much more than 4.5 months, well, even less, but before you know that if you have the grant or not. And normally the eligibility period would be from the 1st of January 2022. That's why also we need to have the deadline before the start of the eligibility period. These are all the rules which we must apply when we are talking about operating grants. Next slide. Now, I'm going now to go into the definitions, and we're starting with youth. We have 2 categories. It's the same for education. 2 categories. One is for European non-governmental organizations, and the other one is for EU-wide network. Let's look at them. The category 1, European non-governmental organizations in youth. These, you can look them up in the Erasmus Plus program guide. These are NGOs that operate to a formally recognized structure composed of a European body secretariat legally established for at least 1 year in an EU member state or a third country associated to the program, so associated to the Erasmus Plus program, and which have national organizations / branches in at least 9 eligible countries. And these national organization branches, they must have a proven statutory link with the European Body Secretariat and be active in the field of youth. Now, this is a fairly long definition, and it has several elements. We have created a specific annex for this definition, so you can sort of cross off if you fulfill these conditions. So a formally recognized structure composed of a European body secretariat legally established for at least 1 year. That is the first thing. Formally established, that means normally that you are a recognized organization within your own country according to some business register and so on. In an EU member state or a third country associated to the program that I have just gone through, this is the eligible country definition which we just talked about. And the network for which you send in an application for should be established in at least 9 eligible countries. So you need to have branches, national organization in at least 9 eligible countries. It used to be 12 eligible countries, so the network should cover 12 eligible countries. Now it's only 9 eligible countries, so you can say that we have relaxed the definition a little bit on that account. And if you then look at what the A there on the slide, that the national organizations or branches, that they must have a proven statutory link with the European Body Secretariat. What does that mean, to have a proven statutory link? It means 3 things, or can mean 3 things. It could be a legal bond, or it could be an economic bond, or it could be a cooperation agreement, a memorandum of understanding. And you will note that I say or between them. So one of these conditions is enough. You can have more of them, of course, but one of them is enough. And most importantly, when you are talking about applying for the youth CSC call, your organization and your network should be active in the field of youth. So that was the first definition. The other one, which is on EU-wide network in youth. We know, because we have run these definitions for many years, and we know that there are many more European NGOs and there are EU-wide networks, but we also do fund quite a lot of EU-wide networks. So what is an EU-wide network? It's an informal network which must be composed of legally autonomous non-profit organizations which are active in the field of youth and run activities that support the implementation of the fields of action of the youth strategy. And they operate, or the network operate through an informal governance setting composed of an organization legally established for at least 1 year, so it's the same as for the European NGO definition, or the date of submission, at the date of the submission of the application. So the organization should be established legally for at least 1 year in an eligible country with functions of, and the organization should have a function of coordination of and support to the network of at the European level. So that is the applicant. And then the other organizations should be established in at least 9 eligible countries. And that's the difference really from the other definition, is that here we are talking about that the network, it's informal, and that it should involve young people in the management and governance of the network. So this is the definition of an EU-wide network in the area of youth. Now I'm going to the education and training one, where you also have the same 2 categories of organizations which are eligible for this call. The first one, the category 1, can you go to that? Yeah. It's in fact exactly the same as the definition for the youth ENGO, except for that in the case of education and training, the organizations should be active in the field of education and training, but all the other partial components of this definition, they are the same as they are for youth. So formally recognized, legally established for at least 1 year, at least 9, covering at least organization in 9 EU member states and third countries associated to the program, and that the national organization must have a proven statutory link with the European body secretariat. So that was an easy one. It's 2 definitions which are the same. Now here's the difficult one, and I'm not going to read through this whole slide. There's a very specific definition for what is an EU-wide network in the area of education and training, and you can see all of the criteria there. What I want to underline is on the next slide. It's and this is why it's a specific definition. It says that the EU-wide network in education and training should fulfill the 3 following requirements: that they should represent more than 1 major stakeholder group, which means learners at all levels, I think. And they should be active in a number of specific education sectors, and they should also be active in more than 1 major cross-sector area as defined on this slide. And there should be at least 20 member organizations, so those are the European NGOs, and be independent of public authorities and so on. You can see this is a very specific definition, and there are very few, I would expect, of these organizations at European level. Let's go to the next one. This is the most important slide probably of all of those that you will see here in this presentation. This is the timetable for this open call. So we published the call in October. At the end of October, we would dearly or would very much have liked to publish it before. We couldn't, unfortunately. So you do not have a lot of weeks to put together an application. The deadline is, as you see there on the screen, the 15th of December. I think it's a Wednesday, isn't it? Yes, it's a Wednesday at 5 o'clock. We will do the evaluation in January, February next year. We'll probably start even before Christmas. And normally, you should have information about the results of your application already in March 2022. So 3 months after you have applied, which is pretty speedy, given that this is the Commission and all our issues which we have with our IT tools, but we really we are under an obligations to try to respect this timetable, and I do hope that we will be able to do that. So the grant agreements we will do latest by end of April next year. Next slide. Okay. Now, when you do an application for whatever call under the Erasmus Plus program, there are 3 hurdles, so to speak, that you need to get over. First of all, you need to respect the admissibility criteria. That's basically that you respect the deadline and you submit an application in one of the EU languages. We prefer English, French, German, and so on, but you're allowed to submit an application in all EU languages, and also that that it's done through the portal. These are the 3 admissibility criteria that we run. Then there are a number of eligibility criteria. These are that you fulfill the definition of being a European NGO and so on. But now I'm coming to the criteria which makes us say, well, this is a good application that we want to fund, or that is an application that we want to not fund. So that is basically how well have you composed your application, how well have you fulfilled the 3 award criteria. And we're now going to go through the 3 award criteria, because as I said earlier on, we're given an operating grant, so we are supporting the functioning of your organization. But what we are evaluating on is the activities which your organization do, and our evaluation in terms of how we treat the award criteria, that is in relation to the activities your organization carry out. So let's go through the award criteria. First of all, there are 3 of them. And you can see the 3 of them here on the screen. First of all, how relevant is your project proposal in relation to the objectives, the priorities of the call, and we give 30 points for that maximum. Then how well have you described your project, so the quality of the project design and how you want to implement your project. That gives maximum 50 points, and the impact and dissemination activities, so how the outputs of the project will be done, that gives a maximum 20 points. And there are some thresholds which we are working with, so you can maximum get 100 points for a proposal. I don't think I have ever seen that, but we have very good proposals up in the 90s as well. So it is absolutely possible to put together a very good proposal. The minimum pass is 60 points, so that means that you need to have 15 for relevance, 25 for quality, and 10 points for the impact. and that is where we will still accept your proposal to say that it's fundable, but it doesn't mean that your project will be funded if you pass the threshold of 60. That depends on how much of our budget is eaten by, the good projects. So we basically count down from the projects given most point until we reach, in the case of youth, 4 million, and then we make a threshold there. Those are the budgets which we are, those are the projects which we are funding. There might be projects which we do not fund, but which have still passed the quality criteria, so that they have still more than 60 points. They might go on a reserve list. So if we get more money, then we would fund those, or they are not funded, but the quality was still all right. And then you have all the projects which are below 60 points. They are rejected because of too low quality. Next one. Here you have all the relevance criteria. These are the ones, well, they relate both to youth and education and training in this slide. There are two calls, so you will see them separated in the call, but what the organizations must explain when they apply for the call in terms of relevance is that they the extent to which the applicant runs activities that support implementation of EU policies, and that is then in respectively the youth and in the education and training sectors. We also look at the proposal's relevance in terms of the aims and objectives which are treated in the application related to the youth strategy for youth and the European youth goals, which is they are part of the youth strategy, and for education and training, it's more related to the European education area and the digital education action plan, what Renato presented earlier on. The proposal that should also demonstrate relevance of activities to be carried out in relation to the 2022 European Year of Youth, which is for 2022. We have not published within the Commission a lot about what is the European Year of Youth. I think you should relate to what Babis said earlier on in the presentation, and you're welcome to contact us on that. What is the European Year of Youth and how you can support the European Year of Youth? In the end, what we are doing is, in fact, if you have great ideas, then we evaluate them and you get points for having good ideas in relation to what you think the European Year of Youth should be. I should say maybe for the European Year of Youth, and Barbie said it as well, I mean, we only knew about it mid-September when Ursula von der Leyen, she talked about it in her State of Union speech. So we are all trying to define what we would like to have happening in the European Year of Youth, and you are absolutely invited also try to specify that in your applications, and it's really a dimension which we are looking forward to evaluate and to look at. So here at the end of this slide, you see that the activities that you propose should be relevant, and there you have two parts for youth. It's for youth participation, youth volunteering, youth work, and youth inclusion. And for education and training, it's all of what is going on in the education sector, from early childhood education and up to adult education, higher education, and so on. So in that sense, it is a fairly broad field which you can relate to in terms of relevance. Also, we have, and that's quite special for this call, in terms of the Erasmus program, we have a sentence which says that your activities which you propose in your proposal should actually be relevant to what you are doing in your organization, so the aims and objectives of the applicant. I think that's important, that you should relate to what your activities are normally. That's it. Next one. The quality, so the quality of your project, the project design and so on. So we're looking at the work program, the methodology that you propose, and how they relate to the aims which you want to fulfill. We look at the consistency between the objectives and the activities that you propose, and we look at how you are working within the network, how the tasks are distributed, and if there is a balanced and efficient way of working, and how you achieve your aims, your goals. We look at how you run your organization, the quality of the management arrangement, and we also try to look at cost effectiveness. That's not always very easy. It's normally trying to look at your proposed budget as compared to the activities you want to carry out, so the work packages that you have defined, and we have some measures which we use in order to look at cost effectiveness. Most importantly, it is that you have an easy, understandable, and transparent budget, and how you allocate your resources according to this budget. Now, we also look at the profile, the number, and the diversity of your network members, as well as what they are, which different kind of roles they have in your network. That's another part of it, and then if your application build on activities which you have already carried out, or which you have already had funded from the EU Commission, then we look at the added value of what you want to do now in 2022 in relation to these activities which you have already carried out. Next one. Last award criteria is the 20 points which we give for the impact, the dissemination, your communication activities. So this is about the expected short and long-term quantitative and qualitative impacts of your activities. It's about the proposed contributions, recommendations to be addressed to policy makers, to all our youth and education and training providers, and all other stakeholders which are relevant at both European, national, regional, or local levels. We don't distinguish there. It should be explained in your proposal where you direct your contributions and your outputs, where you direct them to, and who you want to influence, and why, how you expect to do that. And lastly, when we're looking at bank impact, we're also looking at what you expect in terms of results, outcomes, and deliverables, such as policy contributions, position papers, events, conferences, whatever you want to do in that regard, as well as, you know, awareness raising campaigns, training programs, non-formal training, and so on. Lots of things you can do in order to apply for this call. Now, in the the application forms, there are more of them. They are not so difficult to fill in my view, but they need to be filled in. So there's a part A, which is about the organization data, basically, and it gives itself. The only thing is, because we have this specific definition for who can actually participate in this call, so European NGOs or EU-wide networks, we are not talking about participants in the way that is specified in the application form part A. We are talking here about what we call mono-beneficiary grants. So we give one grant to one organization, and that organization represents a network of minimum 9 parties. So we're not talking about participants, which are, you know, like affiliated entities or associated partners or whatever. We are basically talking here about a network of minimum 9 members. That is what you should remember when you fill in part A of the application form, because there are some prompters in that part A of the application form which are not really relevant for you. Instead, you will find on the funding and tenders opportunities portal, you will find an Excel annex which goes more into the dimensions of the European NGO definition and the EU-wide network definition. It's that annex which we need in order for us to judge if you fulfill the criteria for being an European NGO and or an EU-wide network. Now, on this slide here, we have a presentation of what is part B of the application form. There's a small part C, which is really, really small, which is for the youth path about the youth goals. I don't think there's a part C for the education and training part. Isn't that correct? No. Yes, that's correct. And then there is this Excel annex which I have mentioned. So there are basically only 3 obligatory documents that you need to upload on the portal in order to apply for this call. So it's part A, which is about the organization details. It's part B, which is about the substance of your application, and then it's this Excel annex. And for the youth part, I think we have a small part C as well on the youth goals, which you need to cross off. But that's a very easy annex. Now, my eyes are a bit too bad. I can't really read that, so just let me take a drink and... slide is it? I'm sitting and reading slides sometimes when I can't remember them, and they are a bit far away. So now I'm looking just up this slide. So in the part B application form, you need to fill in the award criteria, which we have just talked about. So the relevance of the project, the quality of the project, and the impact of the project. And we talked about these different issues which you have to put in this part of the application form. We are talking about an application form and there is a limit for the number of pages that you are allowed to submit to us. We, in general, do value very much constructive and short and precise applications. Of course, with all the, how can I say that so it doesn't sound like it's a contradiction, but with all the necessary details, so we can evaluate your application. But there is a limit in the number of pages which you can submit, which is 70 pages. So 70 pages is the absolute maximum that we would accept for the application form. And for the application form part B. And it's very easy if you do more than 70 pages, which you can in fact do. There are no cuts, but we, when we analyze your contribution, we do actually cut your application at 70 pages. And we have a system where we have experts who evaluate your applications, and they are told not to take more than 70 pages into account. Now, in part B, you are going to talk about the 3 award criteria, but there is also a part of part B which comes after the award criteria, which is more about a technical description of your project. And next slide. Oh yeah. Well, no, I was too fast here. I'm still talking here about the award criteria that you should be. No, go to the next slide. That you should be relevant, coherent, complete, clear, and concise, and results and impact oriented. Remain focused on call description and on your action, and remember that there is no limit in characters, but there is a limit in number of pages, which is maximum 70 pages. This is what I just tried to describe in other words, but here you have it on the slide. If we go to the next one, then. Now I'm finished with the. I have just a note here from my colleague. I'll just. But when you come to it, yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, I have talked for a long time now. I'm going to give the word to my colleague Cecilia from the Education and Training unit. We have worked very closely together on these 2 calls, and she's going to give you a bit more technical background information. And we're going to switch a little bit between Cecilia and other colleagues which are here now. And I just want to know, when are we going to have the break? Just after, yeah. Yeah, so we will have a break, I think, in like 20 minutes or something like that. Yes, yeah. So, Cecilia, please, technical information.
Thank you very much, Lena. And good afternoon, everyone. I hope that everyone can see me and hear me. I think it should be working, I hope. So my task before the short break is actually to go through the submission system, the more technical part, including how to find the call and how to access the submission system, and also to how to complete the online part. And as mentioned already, in the afternoon, after the break, you will have more information about the annexes and also the part B. For the submission system that we are using now, it's actually integrated or managed by the EU Funding and Tenders portal. And it's an electronic portal for all EU funding and tenders. And it might seem a bit scary at the beginning, but it's actually not that difficult. It's just that it's new for everyone. And there are many advantages also with this new system, harmonization. All the Erasmus Plus actions of the agency are actually using this system. So, and it also makes it much more easy for you to manage your application, because the good thing is that you can edit as many times as you would like to, and also submit, and you can still edit it again before the deadline. So this is really an advantage in this process. The disadvantage could be that it's not really customized to all actions, I mean, for each action. So there might be some parts that you find a little bit not really maybe relevant, but it's because it cannot be customized to each actions. But the idea is really to make it much easier, and once you have done one application, it should be easier to make future applications as well. Next slide, please. And in order to find your the call, you have to go to this funding and tender portal, and we have some links at the end of the presentation where you can find it directly to go there. And once you are on this website, you can just add a search word CSC for the action, and you search, and you will get actually 3 results coming up. Next slide, yes, perfect. And there you have the 2 calls, the one for youth and the one for education and training. And if you click on these calls, one of them, next slide please, you will have, let's say, the key information about the call, the key documents, you will have the deadlines, you will have everything that you need actually. And the first thing that you should really do, and that Lena also mentioned in her presentation, is really to read the call. That's the first point of departure, so read it carefully. You also have a manual that you can consult on the online submission. And you can also find the documents that you need later on in the process when you have to submit the application, the annexes. You also have the link to the model grant agreement, where you can find information about financial and reporting aspects, for example. So you have really everything on this web page with the call. We can go to next slide, yes, thank you. I will not repeat what Lena already presented, but there are some admissibility criteria. You have to submit online, of course. You have to make sure that your application is complete, that it's readable, accessible, and that it has also all the forms uploaded in the right format. Lena also mentioned already the limit of the 70 pages. If you exceed these pages, they will not be readable and they will not be taken into account during the evaluation. So these are really the admissibility criteria. Then you have the eligibility criteria. So you should really make sure that your activities are in line with the objectives of the different calls, and you should really select one of the calls and prepare the application and really make sure that you comply to the eligibility criteria. I will not repeat what has already been said, because we are coming to this also later on in the presentation when we see the different parts of the online submission. I think we can go to the next slide, in fact. There are 2 things also before you can actually access the, let's say, the e-form itself. You need to have an EU login. That's the first thing. And if you don't have one, you need to register to get it. And this is really a personal login, so you should keep it for yourself. The second thing to do is actually to register your organization in the participant portal. and it's to get this PIC code. It's actually a participant in the identification code that you need in order to, how can I say, have some of your data in the system. So these two things you need before you can actually go back to this EU funding portal and the call where you find, we can go to the next slide please, where you find start submission button. And when you go there, you will come to the e-form itself. I think we can go to the next slide. So here you insert the PIC code of your organization, and it will search in the system for your organization. And once you find it, you can just select your organization. We can go to next slide, please. So it's an easy way of actually having all your details of the organization. So you just select it. And then you actually can go to the next point, which is the role in the application. And you have one main contact. That's really the person coordinating the proposal. And this is mandatory. But as you all know, it's very good to have also a backup. Because in the process, there might be a reason to contact you for clarifications. So then you need to have a contact person also. So please foresee someone in your organization for this role. We can go to next slide. Then the next is to have an acronym of your proposal, and also to complete the summary. And it's important to remember that this summary should be the same as in Part B, but we are going to present Part B later on today after the break. So here you can do these two things, so the acronym and the abstract. And once you have done that, you can save and go to the next part in the process. And you will actually have a little, how can I say, disclaimer saying that your organization will be notified about its involvement in the proposal to be submitted. So there is a warning, and you just click yes, that you agree to it in this case. And then you will come to another, how can I say, disclaimer with terms and conditions to be accepted for using the submission system on the portal. And here is also to accept and go to the next step in the process. And this is a little bit an overview what it looks like. So you have the e-form. So you have, let's say, basic input with the project details like the abstract, the acronym. You select your organization. This is also the place, this overall e-form, where you can download and upload documents, and also to validate and submit the application. Then you have three parts. So you have part A, which is online purely. And there you have three forms to be edited. And these forms are related to the general information, the participants, and the budget. Then you have the part B, which is actually the description of the action, together with the budget is the estimation of the resources needed. And this you can download on, let's say, in the part of the e-form and upload it. And then you have the annex for youth and for education and training. And these you actually find on the page of your call document. I showed it in the previous slide. So this makes the whole proposal, these three parts, under the umbrella of the e-form. We can go to next slide. So In the system, you have the possibility to click on Edit Forms. And here you will actually come to the part where you had this general information, the participant, and also the budget. We can go to the next slide there. And we have an introduction part. And you just click on it again on the three different forms. You see them on the screen. Show, and there you fill in the data. We can go to next slide. And this is really the general information. You have information about the duration. You have the acronym. This is completed automatically from the previous steps, together also with the abstract of the proposal. You can also select the language you want to submit the proposal in. For the duration, it's actually blocked in the system up to 12 months because the normal duration is 12 months. You also have to complete the information about the priorities, and those were presented in earlier slides as well. So there you have the possibility to select and to complete. And if you have submitted any proposals the last 2 years, you have the possibility to provide information together with the reference or the contract numbers. And once you have done this, you come to the declarations, and these are compulsory. So you need to tick these declarations that you agree. And if you have some information, you can just click on the links, and you will come to the different website where everything is explained. So you will have the information on that as well. The second form to edit is on the participants, and this is automatically retrieved from the previous steps with the data, and you can provide some further data. Normally it's the phone numbers, the contact details, and so on. So there is a little bit more information to be provided. Usually we only have, because it's operating grant, so it's only your organization, the applicant organization, that should be visible in this field. And the rest should be empty, unless you intend to involve affiliated entities. And if you want to know more about affiliated entities, you actually have information in the call document under Chapter 13, important. So there you have further information on this. And then we come to the budget. And this budget actually in Part A is automatically, there are automatic calculations. So you have to first, of course, make your estimation of the budget, and also an estimation of the resources needed, and that you do also in Part B. So once you fill this in, you have to really make sure that there is that the information is coherent between the two, so Part A and Part B. Here you have the different budget categories, and the total eligible costs are actually calculated automatically, I mean the addition. And then you have also the funding rate, which is 80%. So the maximum EU contribution is also automatically calculated. But as Lena mentioned in her presentation, there are actually limits also. So when you when you make your request, you have to take these limits into account. And it can be good to let you know that for the education part, as we have two let's say different limits, the 80 to 125,000, I hope I say the right thing now. And we also have the 200,000. There is actually just a warning on the 200,000. So it's very important to take this into account when you make the budget. And also, financial support to third parties is not eligible also. I don't know if, Lena, if you would like to add something on the budget.
I'm not sure really that I want to put any big emphasis on the budget here in Part A. It should be consistent with what you put into Part B. And you can see the categories here. So you have personnel costs, staff costs, and you have volunteers in there. You have subcontracting, and it's important to underline that subcontracting shouldn't be done of core tasks. It's tasks which you need other people to do, but it's not the core task of the project that you should subcontract. Then we are talking about a category on purchase, so travel and subsistence, it's meetings and hotel costs, for example. And equipment, that's office costs, whatever you use on computers and chairs and I don't know what. And then you have other goods and services. Then you have a total budget, and that is equal to 100%. And of that total budget equal to 100%, we will fund 80%. That means that we expect that 20% of your project costs come from somewhere else. We're not checking these 20%, but we expect that there are 20% somewhere else, coming from somewhere else, and all the budget information that you provide in your application should indicate, the total grant amount, which is 100%, and then the 80%, and what you how these two numbers relate to each other. And you, as Cecilia said, the maximum grant amount you have to keep in mind is 125,000. The minimum is 80,000. Thank you.
So once you have completed the Part A, you do a validation. And there you have the possibilities to see if you have completed everything, if you have completed it correctly also. And in case of errors, these are actually blocking the submission. So you have to go back, you can do show errors, and you can go back and you can correct. And then you have also warnings, and these are not blocking the submission, but it can be, for example, you forgot to put the title or of a person, or you, for example, exceed the 70 pages, then you get a warning for these kind of issues. So the best thing is to go through all the errors and warnings, and then maybe to do a second validation before you submit, just to be sure that everything is fine. And as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, the good thing with this system is actually that you can submit before the deadline, and you can actually go back and reopen your proposal again and submit again in case you want to change something or something has changed meanwhile. So there is a possibility to edit it several times. And your proposal, you actually find it also in the EU funding and tender portal under My Proposals. And once you submit an application, you actually get also a number, an email notifying you with the number and everything. So it's easily to find it back again. So for the next slide here, yes, thank you. We have already gone through all the edit forms, and now we have the the annexes and Part B. And the Part B, you find it directly in the system. So you can download it, and it's in a Word document. You complete it, and then you have to save it as a PDF file, and then you can upload it. So the Part B, when you upload it, this little red, how can I say, mark will become green when it's uploaded. And then you have the annex, and this you find under the call document on the portal. And this one you also download. It's an Excel file. You complete it, and then you upload it as a PDF file. And when it's uploaded, it will become green in this this mark that is currently in red. So this is the way you find the different annexes. We can go to the next slide. I think it's the one. Yes, thank you. And here you have the same thing. So you also have the youth annex also under the call document. And you do the same thing. And the Part B, you can download it from the system directly and upload it. Yeah, and this is just to show again where you can find the Part B template. So we have already mentioned this one. I think we can go to the next one, in fact. And once you have everything complete, all the annexes uploaded, the Part B, that's the moment you can validate again. That's the best thing. And then you can submit. And once you submit, you should receive an email with the number also. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia. This is all for the first part of the technical explanations which we have. We're now going to have a break for 15 minutes, and we will return. I can see that we are 5 minutes before 4 o'clock, so we will return 10 minutes past 4, and there we will go into the how you complete Part B of the application form and the annex which we have talked about. So have a nice break, and we come back 10 past 4 o'clock. Okay. We are now coming back from the break, so the time is 11 minutes past 4, and we will continue our technical, the more technical part of this presentation, and talk about part B now. We have with us José. This is another experiment. Yes, he's there. And I hope you can see him. The youngest member of our crew here. We're very happy to see you, José. José is also participating long distance, and he will go through the most important annex which you need to complete, which is part B, and he will also talk about this Excel annex, which we have mentioned sometimes throughout the presentations, but which we will now go into more depth about. So José, please, let's hear what you have to say.
I hope you can hear me. I think you could hear Renato, so there is no reason you cannot hear me. So welcome to everybody. I'm indeed not in Brussels. I'm in the middle of the Atlantic here in the fantastic island of Madeira, and it's a pleasure for me to contribute to this info session. I must confess that I've not followed 100% of what was before, but I followed a large part of it. And indeed, as Lena said, we are entering now in the part which is maybe the most frightening or new for most of you. As Lena said, I'm not the youngest in the team, and myself, I've managed to understand it. So we are dealing here with people working in education, of youngsters who are used to these IT tools. So I think after a while, it becomes quite straightforward. I will try to help you. We are all discovering also this new tool, which in the midterm should bring us a lot of added value, not only for the agency, but also for the applicants. Only entering the call itself, you will realize by going through the portal that you have hundreds of calls which are opened. Of course, all those calls are not necessarily available for youth organization or education organizations, but many of them are, and they are not limited to the DG Education and Culture or to the executive agency. So take advantage of this possibility to look for more calls than those that you are familiar with. But I close the parenthesis because now we are talking about civil society cooperation, and we're going to enter into part B. I will have to ask the colleagues to pass the slide for me because I cannot do it myself from here. So please move to the next slide. And I take also the opportunity to say that contrary to what Lena said, I will ask our trainee, Katarina, to do the presentation on the Excel sheet. So Katia, get ready because I will give you the floor in some 10 to 20 minutes maximum. You are familiar to the right-hand side because Lena already presented you the 3 award criteria. To be honest with you, that's the basis on which the experts will analyze your proposal. We have to recognize that the way this part is structured, the specific question for each section 1, 2, and 3 doesn't match exactly the award criteria and sub-criteria that appear in the core document. Please refer to the core document, take each of the bullet points which are under relevance, quality, or impact, and address them in the better place that you will find in these subsections, okay? This is a little bit the consequence that we have to pay for using a corporate tool, and we hope that next year or the upcoming year we will have an application for which matches much better our award criteria. So 3 award criteria, and then what I'm going to talk now in more detail is section 4, the work packages, the deliverables, the timetable, and the subcontracting. This form, you will download it. It will be a Word document, but when you save it as a PDF because otherwise you will not be able to upload it. There is no other annex than this form and the Excel sheet Kasia will talk to you about in a few minutes that you need to submit. So you will see at the end of this form and in several parts of at the end of part B and in several parts that there are annexes like the financial capacity, like the financial balance for year N-1, like the CVs. Forget about all that. You don't need them. only part B and what we call part C, which is the Excel sheet, okay? Maximum 70 pages. Now, you don't need to go to 70 pages. I mean, there is no point to annoy the expert by repeating 3 or 4 times in different sections of your application the same information, because that will go against you. So it's better to have a proposal of 50 pages, you go straight to the point, than a proposal of 20 pages when you repeat 3 or 4 or 5 times the same information. Please pass the next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're entering now in section 4, section 4.2, or section 4 of part B, which covers the work packages. It's not a surprise, even for us, this was difficult to digest. This is now our 4th call using e-grants and using this part, so we start getting familiar to it, but we start also to improving our recommendations to the applicants. So I hope that as compared to those who have applied to capacity building or to European Youth Together or to the cooperation partnerships in 2021, our CSC clients will receive a better instruction after this info session. So the recommendations, the work package section is a section that you can repeat as many times as you wish. So you can have 20 work packages if you want to. Our recommendation is to have minimum 3, and most probably a recommendation is to have 3. I'm coming back to this. The first work package should be for the management, or you will manage your grant, or you will manage your network, your EU, your European NGO, or your Europe-wide informal network. All these elements in the management of the grant, in the meetings that you will organize, all that should be work package 1, including your statutory meetings for those who refer to what was a unit cost in the previous call for proposals under this action. The last work package should be for dissemination communication, and this is an important element in the context of this call, which is a call to support policy. So in order to support policy, by definition, you need to make your actions visible. You need to disseminate them. You need to reach as many stakeholders as possible, and that would be the last work package. And in the middle, you've got your specific activities. I would tend to say that in 1 year's time, you can concentrate on one core group of activities, and then you would have only 3 work packages. But it's possible that you would say, okay, this is the European Year of Youth, for instance. We had foreseen other things in support to the EU Youth Dialogue. We're going to have 1 work package for the European Year of Youth, and we will have 1 work package for this specific youth goal for 2022. Take your decision. I would tend to say 3, 4, 5, 6 work packages maximum. That would be for me a reasonable size. There is no blockage, so if you want to present 17 work packages, present them. I can tell you that the experts will probably be a little bit annoyed after the 8th or 9th work package. Let's continue, please, with the next slide. We are here in the part work package. This is designed in principle for multi-beneficiary applications. I think that Lena referred already to this in her introduction. This is a mono-beneficiary application, despite of the fact that you will present an application on behalf of European NGO or on behalf of an EU-wide network, informal network. You are the only participant. Your organization, the applicant, is the only participant, which means that here under the 4th column named participants and name, it's only your organization that needs to appear. And your role is beneficiary or applicant or coordinator, call it as you wish, but there is no need here to have more than 1 organization. If you look at the last column there, you have subcontracting. This part is all the tasks that you will have to implement. So first column task, give the task name, describe the task, and if within this task you need to apply to an external provider for services or goods, specify it. Please remember also, I think it's Lena who presented the budget at the end of part A, that subcontracting is a specific cost category. So if you mention here an activity that needs to be supported by an external provider, mention it here and please align it, ensure that there is coherence with what the budget you will provide in part A, and in a few minutes we will arrive to the budget also in these work packages. Next slide, please. So as you saw, this is called project management and coordination. This work package was highlighted in yellow. It was the first work package that we show. After having introduced all your tasks, all your activities for work package X, you need also to say, as a result of this work package, this would be the deliverables that we intend to produce. What is a deliverable is a concrete output resulting from the activities of the work package. Please don't identify as deliverables all these documents and elements which are internal to your network, internal to your activities. Concretely, for instance, minutes of a meeting. Minutes of a meeting is not a deliverable. It's a way to ensure that the meeting was successful and that you are progressing to that result. For instance, test phase about the portal that we intend to develop. The test phase is an internal milestone that may be very relevant to follow at your end, but what we are interested in are the end results which can be made public afterwards. And that's why there is a column here about dissemination level. We expect that all the outputs that you will produce, all the deliverable that you will produce within this project will be disseminated, will be available on the portal at local level, at national level, at EU level. That's for you to decide. It can be something which is very specific to the local context of the applicant organization or one of its branches or members of the informal network. It can be something which is specific at national level or with this transnational, and applicable at EU level. So you have concrete outputs, substantial deliverables. You have also events. So don't forget, after this table where you see deliverables, you will have also an additional table which shows events. So within each of the work package, you will define on the one hand the outputs and on the other hand the events, if there are any. It is possible that for some of your work packages there are no events at all, and that's not a problem in accordance with the specificity of the work package. Okay, let's continue with the next slide now. So for each work package, you will have also to estimate your total budget. Okay, and I think we received a question in our mailbox already when we say that the grant will be between 80,000 and 125,000. Are we talking about total cost or are we talking about the grant? I've already said it in my introduction. This is the grant. So, but here it will be the total cost. So this is not the grant request. This is your total cost for the work package. And you can see that the columns, personnel, subcontracting, travel, accommodation, etc., are the same ones that Lena presented at the end of part A. My advice is you don't fill in the budget in part A. You will still, if you want to validate, have an error message saying your budget has not been completed, because it's better to start by work packages, filling in this table for each of the 2, 3, 4 work packages that you want to implement, so that you can do the sum, do the calculations, and add correctly the values for your total cost. And as a result, the value for the grant request, which, as already mentioned, I think, should be up to a maximum of 80% of your total cost, limited between 80,000 and 125,000. Next. At the end, when you will have arrived to all your work packages, by the way, the section which is on the left is the event section. I already mentioned it. The event section is work package specific, contrary to the timetable. So for each block of work package that you will copy paste, so in your work document you take the entire work package, you copy it below, and you start the work package N+1, N+2, N+3, and so forth. The timetable covers the entirety of the work package. That's why the task that you see in the left hand side column are mentioned task 1 because work package 1, task 1 of 1, or task 2 of 3. That would mean it's the work package 2 and it's the third task in the work package. This is a good way for us to understand also better how you are going to organize these work packages, how you're going to distribute them within the 12 months of your grant agreement. Next slide, please. Subcontracting at the end also, and this is, I believe, also related to each work package. Sorry for having a doubt now. I believe that the subcontracting section is also a work package specific, so repeat that for each of the work packages. When you will have used in the right-hand side column that we saw with the task, you will have mentioned, okay, for instance, the catering service or the translation service for this or that meeting, or the publishing company that we will use to issue leaflets or flyers or promotion material. All that is usually provided by external services, by subcontractors. So if you have put that under work package 1, task 2 or task 3, you have to repeat it here exactly the same thing. So this is a subcontract under work package 1, task 1, or under work package 1, task 2 for the 2 examples that appear here. And the cost, the justification, the rationale. Best value for money means that you've done your homework and you have looked for a provider which is economically viable and which is the best interest of the best use of your grant. I remind you that core task, the management of your grant, cannot be subcontracted. This is an operating grant. By definition, it's money that is given to your organization in order to help it taking care of all the activities that are foreseen for the year 2022. By definition, this part is your responsibility and cannot be delegated to a subcontractor. Next slide. And that's it. There is just one final part that you need to complete, is the declaration. It's the usual declaration on honor that you add as an additional and specific document if you have applied in the past to the executive agency or to the national agencies. Now this declaration is integrated into, there is one part in part A and a second part in part B. So you just fill it in and that will complete your part B. Next slide. Now we have saved our part B, which is a Word document. We have saved it in PDF, and we are now submitting it in one of these boxes here. Honestly, it doesn't change very much. It's in one box or the other, but there is a specific box which is dedicated to part B, as well as another one dedicated to part C that we will see in a few minutes with Kasia. So you have saved it, you have put it in, and then you have a warning message saying that the document has been successfully uploaded into the portal. Next slide. And I think that with this, it completes my presentation because we are entering now into the annex. I've seen that you have submitted a lot of questions to my colleagues. I could look a little bit at the list of questions. I suggest that we come back to these questions after the final part and the final presentation by Kasia. It has been a long day, I understand. You've been following the presentation since 2 o'clock. The technicalities, we have given them to you already. Now we are going to enter in a more direct answer to your questions immediately after the presentation by Kasia. So I give the floor back to the colleagues in the conference center in Brussels, and I will remain connected and available to address some of these questions if you want me to after Kasia's presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, so now I will present the last document that you have to submit with your application. So this is the annex, which is called, when you download it, it's part C, but actually on the website, it's called Annex Civil Society Cooperation in the field of education or training, or in the field of youth. You can find it on the portal, on the funding and tender portal, or you can find it on the website with the event on EASA website. Then you have to download it. It will be in Excel form. When you open the form, so this one, the first one that we'll go through is the education one. So when you see it, there are only let's say, buttons that you click and there is answer yes or no. Or in the type of organization, you have to write the PIC number of your organization, the name of the organization, and then select relevant type of the organization. And then you also have to mention if your organization is the European NGO, yes or no. So there is no other option that you can type whatever you want. You can only choose yes or no. Then after, when you provide us basic information, then you go if it's European NGO, and then please confirm. It's the same situation. You just press yes or no. And then with the specific information on the bottom at the end, when you see the memorandum of understanding, you just have to put the limit of time, the date. Yeah. So actually, this annex is only more about your legal status. And then when you have to insert the at least 9 organizations of your network, then you have to list them in the next step. And then what is crucial, what is the biggest difference in these annexes? In the education one is the education level. So actually, which field of education will mainly benefit from your project? Choose only one. The same with please indicate which E+ horizontal priorities your organization network are active in, and the same with the last question. So you have to always choose at least one sector or one priority or one field. And it's the same with activity domains. So you just tick the box, and here you have a comment that it has to be at least 2 active domains which have to be selected. And about the submission, so that's referred the same to EU-wide network. So here everything what Lena said before about legibility of your organization, it has to be also provide here the information. So it's the same story that you have to just press yes or no. And at the end, when you finish with all questions, you have to save it as PDF, and be careful because it can save on 15 pages. So just be careful that you save it as 1 or 2 pages. Check before submitting it on the portal. And about the youth annex, it's the same. The structure is more or less the same. The type of organization, the same. You pick. You have to write your PIC number, then the name of organization, type of organization. Then you have to mark yes, no next to questions about the structure of your organization. For the European NGOs, it's the same. You have to select yes or no, and then at the end. There is horizontal priorities, specific priorities, and goals. So it's the same. You have to select at least one horizontal priority, one sector specific for your work, and then at least one youth goal that will be covered. And after, when you fill the form, then you have to submit it as in PDF format. So you can see here that after the part B, there is Annex Civil Society Cooperation in the field of education and training, or Civil Society Cooperation in the field of youth. And you have to validate it, and then you can submit your application. And then I give the floor to Lene, so she will tell you the rest and also answer the questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Kasia. This is our youngest member of our team, and that was very, very efficient, I must say. I do hope you can find the annex which she referred to. It's on the Funding and Tender Opportunities portal when you click in either on the CSC Youth or the CSC Education and Training part. You go down to topic and conditions. I think it's the 5th point on that cover page for the CSC call, and there you will find the Excel annex, and that's the one you have to save in PDF once you have filled it in, and then upload with your application. And to be honest with you, the solution we found for this annex, because we need to check that you are a European NGO on EU-wide network, that was the solution we could sort of support technically this year, because we've had a lot of new technical inventions for our grant management system, and this is what we could manage this year. I don't think it's optimal, but it's the way that we are at the application stage, checking that you are who you are. Now, here again, it's another slide about what is the next steps, what is the timetable. We talked about it, so the one thing you do need to remember is that the submission deadline is the 15th of December at 5 o'clock. And as Cecilia said, you can go in the funding and tender portal. You can download the application form and so on, and you can work on it, and you can save it in the portal and work on it again and save it in the portal and so on. The train has only run once you submit it. So you can actually work in the portal as long as you want, until the deadline, of course. Improving your application day by day, and then submit. Sometimes we see often that there are many applications coming in very close to the deadline. It's a good idea, just for your own peace of mind, to make sure that you apply also before 5 o'clock or 2 minutes to 5 o'clock. We certainly recommend that you apply at least a couple of hours before, so you can rest assured that your application has been sent. Now, we will do the evaluations in January, February. We will inform applicants in March, and in March, April, we will sign the grant agreements. And the grant agreements, as I said, they are retroactive in the way that the eligibility period would start in, or will start in January 2022, if you have indicated that, and will run for the whole year. So it's an annual grant that we are doing for operating grants. That's like that. The next slide. Here are the useful links that we recommend that you look into. There's an online manual on how to submit your applications on the funding and tender portal, how to participate as well. You have that there. There's a support section, and then we also give you the link to the model grant agreement for operating grants. That's where you can see a model of how that grant agreement would look like if your application is successful. If you want to know more about the call itself, you need, of course, to go to the funding and tender portal and look up the calls itself, and that's what we've been speaking about the whole meeting here. The next slide. We normally, when we do these information sessions, you also have the opportunity to express the opinion about what went on in this information session, and you have the link here. We study that for what we are doing the next time around, and also try to improve what we do for next time around. So please fill in the EU survey related to this information session, and we do hope that it's useful for you, of course, also to follow the session and so on. Next one. Yes, so here you have again the two email addresses for the functional mailboxes that we are running and where we will answer your questions that you have sent in. We will also now, I think this is the last slide, is it? Yes. So we have, you have already before the information session and also during this information session sent in a number of questions, and we will take them now. It means that I will answer, the whole team here will answer some of the questions, but I can see from the questions that we have received that many of them are very detailed, and many of them are about if you are, as an organization, eligible for this call. I will again, repeat the general guidelines, what we have on this, but for us to declare that you are eligible or not in such a meeting, it's not easy to do, particularly because you often submit a lot of details, and also because in some instances you actually deserve a specific reply, which we will then give from our functional mailbox during the next days before the deadline. So you can also expect that we will come back to you via the functional mailbox to give you a written reply. In general, what I would like to say for all of you who knows the CSC call as it used to be, and where you were eligible in old days, so to speak, then you are also normally eligible now. That means that that you are an organization which is part of a network of at least 9 members. You have been formally established for a year, and you do activities either in the youth field or in the education and training field, then you are normally eligible. Now, I'm going to take some of the questions now. I look from science, from my colleagues, if they want to take any. I know José, who's still on board, and he will take some of the budget ones that we have talked about. So I'll give him the word when I get a bit tired, and then we will do a bit of ping pong. But otherwise, we will go ahead now, I think. Now, let's first talk about eligible countries. I have mentioned it before, but we have several questions about it. And again, the eligible countries, that is the Erasmus Plus program countries. So it's the EU member states, it's Liechtenstein, Norway, and Iceland, and then it's North Macedonia, Turkey, and Serbia from the southeast European corner of our continent. So these are the eligible countries. We have a difficult one, which a question about eligible countries. That is for the overseas territories. It's like the Aruba for the Netherlands, and France have quite some overseas territories. We will check that. I think there are issues there that it's better that we give you a specific reply to make sure that we get this correct for these overseas territories, which are member of the EU. Then we have some questions which also concerns the issue of eligible countries, because the stipulation for a European NGO on EU-wide network is that the network should be present in at least 9 eligible countries. And you ask, why is it that you are only supporting a big youth organization, and why is it that the criteria are so tough, and so on, and why can't you just support small youth organizations and so on. These are all what I would call like political questions, and it's really not for us from the executive agency to reply to them. But the way this definition is formulated, it has actually worked like that for many years, and the idea is and what the Commission and in the Commission, because all of this is decided by the member states and member states representatives in the last in what they wanted to support was basically the value added of having cooperation across borders. And in this case, it's now between at least organizations based in at least 9 different eligible countries, and that's our criteria. Now, we spoke earlier on, and Kasia presented it now as well. What does it mean to have an EU, a network of 9 members? A network can be established in different ways. So we are actually not talking about big youth organizations. It can be very small organizations, but the requirement is that you work across borders. So you can be an organization which has branches and you are legally connected with branches in 9 countries. It can be an economic bond as well. There is a financing mechanism between you. Or, and this is probably the easiest way of having a network, that is if you have 9 organizations from 9 different countries which have a memorandum of understanding that they work together on an activity or more activities. And that memorandum of understanding should of course be valid for the period for which you want to have a CSC grant. So it doesn't, it can't, it has to be valid, so to speak, before you the eligibility period starts, so before the 1st of January 2022. So we are not specifically targeting big youth organization, but we are targeting big networks, so 9 or more members in this case. Let me go in. Say, it's also important to say that we are talking here about operating grants and its mono beneficiaries. So the operations that we are financing are the operations of the organization who is applying for the grant. So there's nothing in the call which says that you have to give so and so much money to your network or whatever. It's not a multi-beneficiary grant. It is a mono-beneficiary, and we reimburse or the grant is given for your organization and for the operation of your organization, the functioning of your organization. So it's actually not more organizations that we fund. It also means, and I try to make that distinction more time, that is that, well, the money is given for the functioning of one organization, the European NGO. But when we evaluate your application, what we evaluate is the activities of your organization and the network. So this is an important distinction, because we are interested in funding activities either in the area of youth or in education and training, which are beneficial for the objectives and the priorities as they are described in the call. So for the youth strategy, for the European education area, for education, and for the European Year of Youth, and for all these kind of cooperation arrangements you can have between youth organizations, and for example in the area of youth, and between education institution in the area of education. So it's your activities that we are evaluating on, but the money you are given is for the functioning of your organization. That's a very important distinction. Here, José, I don't know if you want to come in now a little bit. I have questions like how a real cost budget, how you do understand that. Do we demand invoices at the end, and how do they document their expenses? What about that? What about documenting volunteer work and so on? Would you like to take some of these questions, please?
Yes, thank you, Lena. You have already specified this is an operating grant, and we need to repeat that as many times as needed. This is not an action grant. It's not a grant that aims to support all costs related to a specific activity, but rather it's a grant which aims at supporting the organization in implementing those activities. So it's a Jesuitic definition, but that's how operating grants are working. So questions such as our statutory meetings, can we have that in? Of course, this is part of your organization functioning. Insurance for volunteers. If volunteers are working structurally in your organization, and your organization is paying insurance costs for them, this is part of your structural cost. If you are now paying the mobility of volunteers in a specific project, that is something different, because it would become an action grant. Okay. Now I went to the core guidelines, and I must confess that I felt myself a little bit naked, because there is not a lot of information on eligible ineligible costs. The only thing I could find is something which already appeared in the slides, is that support to third parties, in other words, using the grants for awarding grants to others, is something which is not eligible within this call. An important element also for those who have asked, I'm a large organization, I'm a small organization, whatever, you can only have one operating grant per year. So if you are a very large organization implementing activities in different sectors, you will not be able to have an operating grant for do everything which is related to, I don't know, education, for instance, but you have also a youth strand, and then you would apply for your education activities to support them, and you would apply for an operating grant for your youth activities. This is not eligible. You will have only one operating grant, and if we see that you had already one, or you have another application ongoing, this would be detrimental for you. But I repeat, in the call itself, there is not a lot of information concerning eligible or ineligible expenditure. So I'm answering here Massimiliano Greco, who has raised a lot of question on expenses for professional services, invoices, journalist, accountant, social media manager. Of course, all those guys, all those professionals which are outside of your organization will be considered as subcontracting. So if you need a journalist to contribute to the final meeting of your network in terms of dissemination of European Year of Youth activities and so forth, these journalists will be paid through an invoice, and this will be part of your expenses declaration. Lena raised a question now on how will this be assessed at final report stage. Well, indeed, if this, when we say that the grant is awarded on the basis of real costs, It means that the agency reserves the right to verify the reality and the relevance of these costs. When we finance through unit cost and when we finance through lump sum, we are looking at the activities. This time we are looking at your expenditure. So everything that you will put in your final report justifying the 80,000 to 125,000 grant that you have received will be based on proofs of expenditure. Okay? I'm not saying that we will ask 100% of these proofs of expenditure. You are certainly familiar with previous projects that were funded on the same basis. We will do a sample. We will ask you for some invoices, and depending on the quality of the proofs that you are sending us, we will stop there and say, okay, we consider that the rest is okay, or we will investigate more and up to 100% of your costs. Another element that Lena raised, but I need to insist on this again, it's a mono-beneficiary grant agreement based on actual cost, which means that only the cost incurred by the beneficiary, and the beneficiary is the applicant, independently of the branches or the associations that compose the EU-wide informal network. Only invoices issued on the name and paid by the beneficiary, the applicant, will be considered eligible. So it's important that if you submit an application with your partners, with your branches, with your informal partners, that the way this grant will be justified, the way this grant will be used, it's exclusively via the applicant organization, okay? Still on Massimiliano's question, insurance costs for volunteers, I've already answered. If these insurance costs are part of structural costs paid by organization to have volunteers working with you, then it's eligible. If these insurance costs are linked to a project that you have with volunteers, then it's not part of an operating grant. Statutory meetings, of course, that's covered by travel, accommodation, subsistence, personal cost if needed. Massimiliano had a question also on North Macedonia. North Macedonia, in principle, is what we call a program country or a non-EU member state associated to the program. Now, in detail, I don't know today if North Macedonia has signed the agreement to join the program, but in principle, it's a question of days. As stated in the call documents, I think that all these countries which are in the process of signing are eligible partners on the condition that they sign before the grant agreement, and that we can verify later on if you wish to. Budget-based, what does that mean regarding reporting? This is a question from Connect. I think I've answered. Is audit obligatory? If you are not a public organization and you have a grant of more than 60,000, you will have to submit an audit. In this case, you will, as part of the management work package, you will include an activity which is a request for an external audit. That's by definition subcontracting, and you will include that among your costs. In case the entire work plan goes to work packages, should we do an expenses table for parts that are not covered by the CSC grant? No, you only need expenses for those parts that are covered by the grant. Eligibility of our organization, I think Lena has answered that, and she's perfectly right. It's difficult, despite of the comprehensive information you've presented in your question, it's difficult to answer now in this info session. Yes, you are eligible. No, you are not eligible. Come back to us with the specific question, and we will look on the basis of internet search on your organization if you correspond to a European NGO or an informal network. Lena said it also, several questions where we are not a big organization. I'm sorry to say that in reality, the EU informal networks, EU-wide informal networks, are there to help small organizations to find partners, nine organizations who are ready with them to implement a work program for 2022 in line with the two sectors, education or youth. So this doesn't need to be a big organization. So I saw here several questions which are coming from organizations saying we are a small organization. Okay, that doesn't prevent you to find 9 organizations with whom you're going to sign a memorandum of understanding. There was also a question, should we have one single memorandum of understanding or should we sign a memorandum of understanding with each of the partners? That's for you to decide. A single memorandum of understanding signed by all parties has the advantage to be one single document everybody can link to. It's more transparent than having individual ones, but you can have individual ones with no problem at all. I'm going down in the questions. How do we organize our work packages and budget? I hope that in the presentation I've been clear about that. Yes, a question about project management. What if the project management exceeds 20% of the overall budget? Read the guidelines. Is there written in anywhere that the work package management should be limited to 20%? No. So it is not limited. So that's an answer to Valentina Milanese. I know that you refer to other actions where it is stated in the call documents that these or that activities are limited in terms of scope and percentage as compared to the overall cost. Here we have no limitation, so present it as you consider it reasonable. I must say that if you say to an expert that 50% of your grant or more will be used only for the management of the grant, he may say this is not really cost effective. So your reference to the 20% is not an eligibility question. It's more being reasonable and being realistic in the way you build your budget. There was the same question from CCIVS. What if we exceed 20%? I've just answered this. Several memorandums or one single memorandum. I've answered it too. Where is the annex with the definition of the European NGO? I think Kasia has shown you. If you scroll in the page of the call, you will find a lot of hyperlinks. Click on them, and I'm sure that the surprise will arrive, and you will find the correct annex. In any case, in a couple of slides, it was shown the path to follow that. There is a question here in the narrative part: which questions labeled "if applicable" are we required to fill in for the call? I think that if you look at the PowerPoint and the presentation I made for the work packages in particular, you would see that things like the milestones, for instance, are not necessary. For the rest, I tried to check if there were other if applicable sections. I could not find them. So please, if you have a specific part on which you still are in doubt, send us an additional question, and we will look at that. Overseas territories, that's an interesting question from Indra Hazel Duarte. I think they are eligible, but if you allow us, Indra, we will come back to your question when the colleagues will look in detail and maybe ask. But in principle, Aruba, as part of the Netherlands, should be an eligible country as part of this call. Maybe Lena can confirm that in a couple of minutes. And I think with that, I arrive at the end. Yeah, still the last question was the budget has to be between 80 and 125. Are these the total cost, or is it only the grant? I think I've answered that when I presented the part B. 80,000 to 125. That's the grant value, which means that you add 20% to this in order to arrive at your total cost. So if I say that 150,000 for a total cost for a grant of 125, I think I'm exactly 20% above the maximum grant. Lena, that's all I can add. That's the questions I've seen. I don't know if there are any new ones now. I think my colleagues have already said it, and I want to repeat it. Between now, 16th of November, and the 15th of December, we remain at your disposal. All these questions that you have raised, we will try to draft answers and upload them on the portal. There is a section for FAQs. You may find it, and for the time being, it's still under construction, I think. But during this week, my colleagues will collect all these questions and the answers attached to them, and we will upload the document to publish it in the website or in the portal as soon as possible. In the meantime, continue using our functional mailbox to send us additional questions if the information provided during the session is not sufficient for you. That's all on my side, Lena.
Thanks a lot, José. Thank you very much. I have a huge number of questions here. I'm going to run through them, and as I said earlier on, we cannot cover all of them today, so we will also try to answer them in written under all circumstances, and you should have feedback from us quite soon. As I said, some of them are very detailed and specific, and those we prefer to reply to you directly. But here are some of these more general ones. Here is one from All Digital, and the question is: the main rule in other EU-funded projects is that beneficiaries of the operating grant are not eligible for indirect cost in other EU-funded projects. As the CSC 2022 will be real cost-based project and not unit cost, we are wondering if it affects the above main rule in any way. And the answer is no. It's the same rule as it have always been. So when you get an operating grant from the EU Commission, and you at the same time have an action grant, so an action grant which sponsors activities of your organization, then this action grant, normally you can allocate 7% of the budget of that action grant to indirect cost for operations, so to speak. But if you get at the same time an operating grant as a CSC, then you cannot use these 7% indirect costs, and we are checking that for the action grants. So this rule is valid, still valid. It has nothing to do if the CSC budget model, if it's real cost or unit cost. It's about that it's an operating grant, and for an operating grant, and if you at the same time have an action grant, then you cannot claim indirect costs for the action grant. It has to be for the same eligibility period, of course. Next question. What is a branch of an organization? Are these members? We use different wordings for what the network members can be called: branch, network member, sub-organization, whatever. It doesn't mean so much what they are called in this case, because as I have underlined more times, you can have between these network members a legal bond and or an economic bond and or an agreement bond, so a memorandum of understanding, a written down deal for how you're going to work together on some activities. So the definition of how these network members, what they are called and what they are, doesn't really mean a lot in this context. When you have a network, though, and you are cooperating together on activities, well, what we are going in and look at is, of course, if this network makes sense in regard to the activities that you are proposing in your application. So this is what is important. We have had more questions about organizations which says that they could apply both for the youth call and for the education and training call. And because we this year have been, so to speak, forced to divide the call into two separate calls, it used to be one call, then indeed you can supply an application for both the youth call and for the education and training part, and it's then up to us to judge if we want to how we evaluate either the youth or the education and training part, and how we do that. There is of course cooperation between us in sorting this out. We do not specifically recommend that you make an application for both the youth and the education and training part, and but it is possible. And obviously, again, it depends on which activities you want to carry out in 2022. If you are okay for both applying for the education and the youth parts. So it depends on your activities and so on. Now, we've had a number of questions which has more to do with the definitions and what it means. And I'm now going to talk about the EU-wide network definition for use, which says that there should be young people in the governance and the management of the organization. What does that mean in practice, and how do we check that? Now, at selection stage, you are just ticking that, in fact, so that's a kind of declaration of honor approval that we have, or proof that we have at selection stage. But when you have been selected for a grant, we are actually checking that in the rules of the organization, so the statute, the ways that your organization is governed, that it says clearly that young people should be part of the governance and memberships. That's what we are checking. When you are talking about, and normally young people, they are up to 30 years old. So that's what we are checking. When you are talking about the European NGO definition, there's not a similar requirement for young people to be involved in the management and the governance of the organization. So there it doesn't matter how old you are when you are applying for the youth part. Okay. Let me try to go. Some more questions. We've had a number of questions where where, as far as I can see, it's small youth organizations coming from all over Europe, which ask, well, they don't have a network and they don't see that there are any funding opportunities for them during this call, and what we would recommend them then to do in order to look for funding opportunities. Well, I mean, we have in this information session talked about the requirement that there should be a network of least at least 9 members from 9 eligible countries in order to apply for this call. But if you don't fulfill that requirement, well, the only thing that we can recommend is that you study the Erasmus Plus program and the program guide, because there are many actions under the Erasmus Plus program which also cater for youth organizations, and you don't have to be many youth organizations working together or anything like that. There are much more or less strict requirements in other actions. They are normally not operating grants, they are action grants, and they are normally done at what we call a national agency level. But please go in, type in your browser Erasmus Plus program guide, and there you will find a lot of options which the Erasmus Plus program offers for youth organizations, for education institutions, and so on. We have also had questions on if education institutions can apply. Yes, they can apply as long as they are non-governmental and non-profit. They can apply for these grants. It's not like we are sponsoring formal education. So again, when you make an application, it's your activities that we are evaluating, so what you want to do with the grant. And there you have to relate to the priorities and the objectives of the call in order to be evaluated in a, well, let's say in a good way. Here another question. The budget has to be between 80,000 and 125,000 euros. Yes, that's correct. That is the grant agreement budget. So that the grant we will give you is between 80,000 and 125,000. We finance up to 80% of your total costs, but I mean, we can also finance 20%, and we can finance 50%, as long as that amount is between 80,000 and 125,000. And you put into your project resources which come from other sources, and that's fine with us. We're actually not asking about these other budget sources which you have, as long as your grant request is between 80,000 and 125,000. Then we don't care so much about the other money, and these 80,000 to 125,000 euros, that they correspond to maximum 80% of your project, of your operating grant. Then there are some issues about what it is that we give funding for. We don't give funding for the network. We give funding for the applicant, so the European NGO, which applies for the grants. So it's a mono-beneficiary grant, and the money goes to that one organization which is applying on behalf of its network. But there should be a network of 9 members behind. And all of these organizations, I assume that they themselves have a budget and cost and so on, but that's not part of this operating grant that we are going to give you. So it's one organization which get the grant, and when you have to deliver the final report, which happens, 2 months after the eligibility period is over, so normally at the end of February 2023, then we reimburse your cost on basis of invoices from the organization, which is the applicant organization. So this is how it works. And because we this year have a real cost-based budget, it means that you are going to suggest real cost, and when your project year is over, so when 2022 is over, and you send in your final report, what we are going to evaluate is your real cost, which you have carried out during this year. So invoices. Invoices means staff contracts and employment, proof of payment to your staff. That's what we are looking at. If you have had a meeting, it's about the cost of the meeting. Nowadays, meetings, well, they can cost very little, as we have seen when they all virtual, but you may want to have meetings in one way or the other. If you have equipment in your office, then we ask for the invoices of what you have in paid for this equipment. So this is how it functions in practice. There are some questions about if you can put in money for actions where you don't know if these actions really will be carried out or not within your organizations. If I was you, I would put in, you're asking for operating grants, and you're asking for between 80,000 and 125,000 during a year. I would have some security for that you're actually going to spend these 80 to 125,000 in your application. Because what happens if you, at the end of the period, when you have to deliver the final report and you can't document that you have spent all this money, well, then we are going to recover the money and we will recover, it's called in a recovery order, we will recover them if you haven't spent them in the way that you had planned to do when you applied for the grant. There's a question here, where can we find partners who want to apply for the subvention? There is a partner search on the Funding and Tender Opportunities portal where you can search for partners. We sometimes get feedback on that tool, and I don't know how well it works for youth organizations yet. I'm sure it will work better over time, but you know, the Erasmus Plus program, it's only quite recently that we've been added to the e-grant tools, so I'm not sure that the partner search work very well. Otherwise, what we can recommend you to do is to go in on the youth portal and see there are a lot of youth organizations, for example, which are present. And I'm sure in the education area, what's existing in the education area? Anything specifically about how they do networks? Eric, Eva? No? Okay. For the education institution, we will answer these questions specifically. Yeah. There is, for the indirect costs, there are no indirect costs in operating grants. Eva wants me to say that. So we are talking here about when you are doing your budget, you do the real costs budgets, and that's it. Okay. And Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There's an issue of language. I think we will publish the call in both French and German. We sent them to translations, and we're actually very sorry that we couldn't. I mean, it's because we are working on a very tight deadlines, and I'm extremely sorry for that. We would like to give you also longer periods for applying, but it wasn't possible. In fact, we managed to publish the call before the annual work program of the Erasmus Plus was published, and that's why you see a disclaimer in the beginning of the call. So we did manage to do that. The annual work program of the Erasmus program has just come out now during last week, I think. Now, for languages, you can apply in all EU languages. It's easier for us when it's in English, French, German, I think. But we also cover other languages. And if we don't cover them within our team, and then we send it for translation. So this is the way it works. The call itself, we were obliged to publish it in English, but it will appear, and I think it's actually this week. By the end of this week, I hope, in German and French as well. So you will have a German and a French version of the call, both for the youth call and for the education and training call. So that's all about languages, yes, that's that. Any more issues? I think we are at the end. Yes, I see that actually. We are 26 minutes past. I'm just checking very quickly because now we are at the end of the session. And if any of you have actually gone with us all to the end, then that's pretty good. We said at the beginning there will be a recording of the session available to you on the EUwide website. That's the same place where you found the advertisement of this info session, and there will also the PowerPoints will be published there. Don't think we have anything else. So we hope that you have enjoyed the session, and we hope that you are able to submit some successful applications. We are looking very much forward to it. And once you have submitted your application, you can have a very good, I hope, end of the year, celebrate with family and friends and whatever you do. And then we will come back to you in the beginning of the next year, in March next year, and tell you if you've had a grant or not. So thank you very much for participating, and let's hope that we can keep in contact. Thank you very much.